Hello, everyone. Good night, and welcome to the Georgetown Tea House. I am here. Your girl Marcel is in the house tonight. I missed you guys. Randy, welcome.
Good night, good night. You hearing me?
I'm hearing you loud and clear.
Oh, beautiful. Tyron, what's
Well,
up?
look. Oh my
I cool,
God.
I'm right, man. Just chilling.
All right.
Okay. I am so happy and I'm surprised you guys tonight. You're so not accustomed to see me here anymore. I've been missing for a few days, for a few weeks, sorry. I mean, I've been in the chat, but I've missed this place. I've missed this seat, and it's so good to be here, be with you guys. My mother was the first one on, saying good night, everyone. Good night, mommy, and thanks for always supporting us at the tea house. All
Sister
right. So
Desiree.
yes, there she is. Today I was showing off her photo on Facebook from our last visit. Yes, so guys, good night again and welcome. I want you to tell me who is on with us, right? As you're coming in to the tea house, please drop your name. Tell us where you're coming to us from. I've not been here a while, so I want to hear from you. Guys, I'm having my tea. It's cold at this end, so I have to, be drinking my
Yes.
tea. You know, we
Sky
have tonight, Randy,
Sky Juice.
sky juice. Mm-mm-mm-mm.
you
Randy's having sky juice. Time, what you
sure that's sky?
having?
You sure that's sky juice? Earth juice. That came from the spring. So
Mm-mm.
so they come from the sky.
That's the good stuff. All right. Well, last week, guys, I was in the chat and I was having a wonderful time listening to the conversation. Listen, I was tempted to leave the job and come home just so that I can really get into the conversation. The conversation was that sweet. People were calling me after the conversation to ask why you guys finished so quickly. You know, they were now getting into the conversation and they were really some ticked off, some saying I agree or didn't agree, and they're like Samantha Douglas is on. Good night, sis. Thank you
My,
so much
my,
for always supporting the tea house. I didn't hear you, Randy.
said my girl, Samantha.
Yes. When Samantha come with her points, and she lay it out nicely, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know, should put you guys, she should put you guys to shame when she starts to lay out her points, you know. But guys, thank you so much for supporting the tea house week after week. This is the place for great conversations. Sometimes we ask very ticklish questions, but we being led by the spirit oftentimes, and whatever is discussed, we want you to go back home and to do your own research and to come up with your own reason for what you do and why you do it. When you read God's word, salvation is a really personal thing. I believe, and we always want you to make sure that you understand it for yourself, and maintain the relationship with Him. So last week, guys, let me tell you, I've been working so hard, right? And for so many long hours that I've been forgetting something that I take pride in doing. I am person Tyrone and Randy who remembers birthdays. I remember birthdays. Of late,
Mhm.
I've been forgetting everybody birthdays. One friend told me today that they called me all kinds of bad words, right? All kinds of bad things, she said, because I forgot his birthday. Right? And I also missed a birthday yesterday. I barely make
Mhm.
it just a little after 12. All right. So I'm not going to make the mistake since I'm on live tonight. Some belated birthday greetings. All right. To some special people. Lindsay Vaughn, who is a real a trooper in the tea house. He's always here. Belated birthday greetings to Lindsay Vaughn and to Sandra Barker. She's always here. Karen Wells yesterday. Conrad Bob Semple, Pastor Bob Semple. Andrea Chichester. Leon Beckles, his birthday too was day before yesterday. All right, so you want to shout to these people, you're special to the tea house. We love you guys, and we're happy to be celebrating with you. Happy that you're still here with us, And then today, Joash, I don't know if you guys remember Joash Powell. Joash, if you're listening or somebody will give you the news, we love you at the tea house. You've been here with us, supporting us, singing for us, putting your 2 cents into whatever topics we had, and we love you for it. And thank you so much for spending time with us. Derek Waterman, he's from Barbados, and he's usually on YouTube, tuned in, listening and saying to Samara, I'm here supporting you. So thank you so much, Derek. Gregory Wiles. Gregory, thank you so very much for always supporting the tea house. He's there and he's always sharing. And then we have some upcoming birthdays. Now, listen, I am covering myself. Tyrone, I am covering myself. Now, Colleen Short, she's from Melanie, my friend from when school together. She's always on the program too. Her birthday's coming up. Karen Kelman Vaughn, Karen, kid, KK's birthday's coming up too. Zonafed David, my sister.
So those
as
two
well.
Karens' birthday in the same month. Wow.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Oh yes. My aunt Jennifer Christie and Jillian Wild. Gregory's sister Jillian Wild is also celebrating her birthday soon. And Olive Campbell, These are people who have graced the tea house stage, and we love you guys, and I want to shout you out and thank you for your support, and know that we love you all. All right. Hi Abraham, we're off tonight. Thank you for tuning in. There's one of my colleagues from work. Thank you so much for tuning in, always supporting me. All right. So we've come last week, like we said, it was really, really grand. A really, really good topic, and a lot of people, you tuned in and you give your views, and so we're just so happy. Tyrone, about last week, tell us your thoughts on, the feedback from last week.
I think when I went back to the chat room and so on, and I saw the feedback, I think people were generally on the side of jewelry and gold not being salvific, not important to their salvation, the relationship with God.
Right.
I think the common thought was that it is simply a matter of how you dress the inside. Humility, love, kindness, showing mercy, and so on. Right. I think that's where everybody's with the whole concept of, for the majority, the whole concept of jewelry and gold and so on. It's and my view that it's insignificant.
Right.
It's of no significance to any relationship with God.
Definitely. And Randy, what your thoughts were when you after the program? I know you had a slightly different take on things.
I like the inputs. Like Tyrone, I don't believe it's salvific, like I said.
Yeah.
However, I don't believe it's also how I should put it. Let's say invoke another debate. It's I don't also believe it's
a bad thing.
So to speak. No, it's not what it is expected of, right? Moreover, it is basically focused on the outward, on the inward appearance and the your relationship with God. I agree it's not salvific. I support this Seventh-day Adventist pronouncement and stance on it.
Right.
So that's my position. So
right.
I would not deprive anybody from their perspective of it, but I do agree with Tyrone. It's not salvific. It is not that critical for your salvation. It's more situational perspective with, to me, in my perspective, some biblical backings that I would support in terms of distraction from one and from one main focus and so on. But yeah, the points were genuinely good. I think we would have helped a lot of people to clear up some things. Persons can draw their own conclusion and based on conviction. So I'm going to leave it as that.
Right, beautiful. Thank you so much. So I'm going to shout out a few more people. Candy, love Candy, thank you. She's always there. And Leonette and Lurlin, the lovely Lurlin. Thank you, Lurl. You know, Leonette, thank you so much for joining us. All right. So tonight we're going to continue our conversation of the matter of garments. Tonight we're focusing on the whole garment aspect of the text. You know, we talk about jewelry, but you know, we talk about the garment aspect as well. Right. So if you have some posters up, you know, asking, you know, what is sin and the like, based on the photo. All right. So stay tuned, guys, and we'll be right. Don't forget to keep sharing the link, and we'll be right back to start our discussion.
Examine any profound event in the Bible or in the history of Christianity, and one is sure to recognize the consistently pivotal role of conversational interactions. We see this at play in Genesis, the first book, where through a series of conversations we witness the fall of our species and the expulsion from the Garden of Eden. The conversation between God and man, the conversation between man and woman, the conversation between the woman and the devil, and so on. At the Georgetown Tea House, we know the great importance and pivotal role that conversations often play in our lives on this earth. And thus, we will seek to engage in the types of conversations that are insightful, stimulating, and thought-provoking. And yes, occasionally a trifle boring. Our hope is that with each visit to the tea house, we can become better aware of who we are, of our relationship with God, and where we stand with each other and the rest of humankind. And yes, through it all, there will be music. For music, it had been written, is the food of love, and God is love. Join us every Monday evening on Facebook and YouTube Live for Conversations at the Georgetown Tea House, a Gospel Side of Me production. Please, do bring along a cup of tea or a glass of your favorite juice.
All right, so we're back, and we're talking about the matter of adornment still. This week we bring it up from last week, and so I'm going to read a few passages from some people that I got, some information I got from some friends that I asked to comment on the topic. All right, I'm not going to call anyone's name, but this is a young woman, and she said, a Christian man or woman should embrace their God-given I asked, how should a Christian man or woman embrace their God-given assets? All right. And she said, a Christian man or woman should embrace their God-given assets from the perspective of knowing and believing that they are really created by God and in the image of God. Psalm 138. She said, it talks about being fearfully and wonderfully made. As such, one should walk in confidence, knowing, believing, and accepting that he or she was specially designed by God. And so all the curves, different texture hair, sizes, short, long, or just in between, was intentionally and specially handcrafted by God. She said, as a quirky woman myself, I struggle at times with this because it doesn't matter what I wear, and this kind of struck me. She said, but what I wear, certain parts of my body are highlighted. However, I'm learning to embrace my body, and I mean, she said some other things. All right, so that was her, right? Um, Another brother, I asked the question. He said, because there were three photos, right? He said the first one, he said it's not necessarily a sinner, but her current attire is appropriate for the eyes of her husband, and she wasn't like fully clothed. So he said that was more appropriate for her husband. He said the guy that had the was very muscular, that had all his abs and thing out. He said that it wasn't for that he had to choose where he would expose that kind of his physique in where it was appropriate and not appropriate. And said the third female, she was fully clothed and covered up. He said, however, even though she was well covered, we're not sure what her thoughts were. All right, what she was harboring in her mind. He said, a sinner is really a state of disconnect, living in sin and wrongdoing contrary to God's word. 1 John 3:4. Right. I had another one. This one was long. I'm gonna read some of it. Genesis 1:31, God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. That included male and female with unique naked propensity to attract each other for purposes of pleasure and procreation. And that was very good also. We can't fault God for that. Rather, we should celebrate him for his creative handiwork, for we are God's workmanship, Ephesians 2:10. Our sexuality, sensuality, and attractiveness to the opposite gender were intended to be freely embraced and encouraged for the glory of God. However, the entrance of the sin factor caused society to place boundaries on our freedom and our behaviors within those boundaries. All right. He went on to say some other things, but here everybody is saying that we were wonderfully made by God. All right, and then somewhere along the line, humans, towards the whole, put a whole different spin on things. All right. So we're going to get right into the conversation. Thank you, guys. Thank you again, guys. It's so good seeing all of you. Thank you so much for coming on. Don't forget to keep adding your friends. Amma Booker, it's always so good to see you. Please keep sharing the link and letting your friends know that the Georgetown Tea House is live, and we are going to be talking again about adornment, and especially as it relates to clothing, etc. So stay tuned, share the link, and we'll be right back.
All right, good evening and welcome again to the Georgetown Tea House. It's good to have you. Randy and Tyrone, welcome aboard. How are you guys doing?
Fantastic.
Okay.
I'm great, man. Great. Thanks for asking.
Okay, good, 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 good. Nice to hear. All right. Like Marcel said, Tyrone, we got a lot of good feedback from last week's discussion. Some people also seem to were sympathizing with Randy. Seem to feel it, that Randy got a little beat up, But I know Randy's a man could take his punches and stay on his ground, right?
Yeah, man, that's all right. That's all right.
Right, right. So
Man,
we're
standing
looking at the
strong.
subject of modesty and modesty with regard now to clothing. Randy, what's your first take as a Christian and also someone who appreciates style? What's your take on modest attire? What do you consider as being modest attire?
Um, in my humble opinion, a modest attire, from a Christian perspective, um, will be something that basically glorifies God, or that something that God will be pleased with. You don't have to be old-fashioned to be modest. You know what I mean? You can be fashionable. You can wear fashionable outfits. You know what I mean? Basically, not too revealing. You know what I mean? Not too distracting, so to speak. In terms of revealing, right? Basically, being properly covered. You know,
Mm-hmm.
right? To me, that would entail modesty for me. Being sober-minded in the way you dress, in terms of respecting the um laws of the land and also of God.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, in a nutshell, as we go down, I'll expound more on my position, so to speak. But that's basically
Okay.
it for me.
Okay, great. Tyrone, what are your own initial thoughts about modesty and how,
My
how would you
thoughts,
define it?
my would define modesty as a moderate exposure of one's self in a way that the viewer,
Mm-hmm.
in a way that the onlooker is only privileged to see what they should see or must see in terms of the person's privacy
Mm-hmm.
and the person's nakedness. In short, only what needs to be exposed or
Mm-hmm.
seen should be exposed and seen.
Okay, now you uttered an interesting phrase there. Only what needs to be exposed. Um, who determines that in your mind, Tyrone? Who determines that?
One, a number of factors.
Mm-hmm.
The context of the environment. For example, you go to the beach and you have to go in the water,
Mm-hmm.
then that calls for different type of exposure.
Mm-hmm.
Then you go to a wedding, you go to a church, that's a different type of exposure. So I don't think there is a one size fits all in terms of that. As it
Mm-hmm.
relates to who determines that, from a general perspective, the person's principles and values will determine that.
Right.
And again, the environment. And from a Christian perspective, the relationship with God will influence and determine what is exposed.
Okay. Now, Randy, when we consider Tyrone's point, exposing what needs to be exposed. But when we look at different cultures, different cultures, and we spoke a little bit about it last week, right? When we, referred to the Amerindians and so on in Guyana. Um, Different cultures have a different approach to attire. So would it, in your view, Randy, be really accurate, when we use a phrase like what needs to be exposed when in certain culture, being basically half naked is the norm? How do we respond to that kind of instance?
I tend to agree with Tyrone on that. What needs to be exposed, or what could be exposed based on events, like you would have said. If I'm playing sports, you don't expect me to run to do 100 meter in a long dress, or a long pants, or you know what I mean, something like that.
Right.
If you're at the beach, I mean, it only makes sense for you to swim in less clothes rather than have, you know what I mean,
Mhm.
right? It's not wise. You'll drown faster. Um, I mean, but like in terms of, like we mentioned last week, where we had one parliamentarian entering parliament in a cultural event. Like for me, there is a time and place for everything. All right. And then the norms of society also determines um what is really acceptable, or what should be the acceptable norm, right? Because the thing about it is that in parliament, um it is customary, or it is basically enforced, that people should dress in a certain way, right?
All right. Let
Society.
me ask you this right now, Randy. I'm sorry to
Yep.
cut in, but let me ask you this right now.
Mm-hmm.
You say you talk about what society sees as the norm. Um,
Mm-hmm.
have you ever thought of, have you ever seen where maybe society and your own interpretation of biblical teachings maybe don't quite gel? That maybe something that is okay with society is not necessarily okay, from a biblical perspective.
Yeah. Like society is being perverted in so many ways, and
Hmm.
what was um not accepted is now being accepted. Fashion has taken on a whole different form. All right.
Hmm.
And so if you really if you really sometimes place full emphasis on what society says, you will probably get yourself into trouble, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's why we should try to place emphasis on what God really thinks of us, and what will please God. You understand me? What God will think of me if I should do certain things, right? Because society right now is really sinful as it is, and what is not, what was once um forbidden, right, is
Hmm.
now accepted, and all of these things, all right? So fashion has taken on a whole different tone altogether. So something you have to be careful, you know what I mean? But then again, like I said, coming back to the story earlier, I mean, I can go to Africa, and really and truly, if I go to Africa where we have a bunch of half naked people because of their culture, I would feel uncomfortable to strip down and to identify with them too. You know what I mean? Because it's not where I come from. So to
Hmm.
me, that would not be acceptable, or that might not
Hmm.
be. I mean, I would respect their culture, but you wouldn't find me like dressing in a way, or like I wouldn't go to
Right.
the
Right.
urban village and have all my rearing outside, and just two little straw or something covering, and going around the place. You understand what I'm saying? I'm not accustomed to
Right.
that,
Right.
right? So to me, that would be out of place, right? And
Hmm.
moreover, where it is accepted in a society, then there's nothing we can do about it. But for instance, like the story that happens in Parliament, where this guy had a choice. It's not that he
Hmm.
didn't wear a suit before or whatever, but he just feel that he had the right to display his his culture wherever he wants. You know what I mean? How would it be if I should walk in a church half naked and see my African outfit as a leader of the church and so on? So we need to take a set of things into consideration, as Tyrone would have said. Events, culture, all of these things. And like people are saying in the chat and so on, certain things are subjective, certain things it has its time and place and all of these things. But like I said, for me, it all depends on how I think God, if what I'm doing, if it would please God, you know. So
Right.
I will dress according to my conscience in terms of my belief in God, my relationship with God, as Tyrone would have said. So you wouldn't find me doing certain things, or I wouldn't expect certain people to do certain things that I will side with. You know, I wouldn't want my partner or my daughters to be revealing, and I say, oh, they're young, it's part of society, and all of these things and so on. That's not just me. Those are not my standards, and so it will be good for me to accept and to go along with it. It might be different to somebody else, you know. I don't know, but that's just me.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, go ahead, Tyrone.
yeah, I want to jump in here. Sometimes we talk about culture, and as a Christian, as believers, we leave out God out of culture. But God has a culture. God is a cultural God. God took Israel out of Egypt, and he said to them, I'm going to give you a culture. I'm going to create a culture. And this culture will determine how you live. And he told them specifically, do not behave like the culture from which you came. That is from the Egyptian culture. And so God gave his own culture to his people. And he gave them their own diet, their own dress, everything. He gave them everything new. Because he's creating a set of people that will live up to his standard, that will reflect who he is. And so if we take that into consideration, what will come into play now is who defines modesty. As I said last week, I cannot depend on society to define modesty for me, because society is like shifting sand. So there is no absolute definition for modesty in society. And so I find the definition for modesty in God. And in saying that, what happens is this. I'm not going to condemn another culture also, but what I'm going to say is this. As God reveals himself to people, they behave accordingly. And this is where the love of God comes in human language. If I know that I'm in love with somebody and what I do offend them, then I will try everything possible not to do it. So when God reveals himself to all these people, all different culture, and they begin to understand who God is, and their love for God will determine how they dress, what they do, how they present themselves to society.
Okay.
And I believe that is where the issue should be, person's love relationship with God, because Paul says love compels him to do and to live. And so to speak about modesty and culture and dress outside of love for God, I think we might be missing the point.
Okay. Sandra Barker, one of our viewers, she is saying, I think we need to be more respectful when describing a culture's native dress, especially the indigenous people in Guyana and on the continent. Half naked is not how they see themselves. There, in many cases, caters to their environment, right?
That's a very good point.
Yeah, that's true, and that's a very good point.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was going to make mention of it. We're not here to disrespect anybody. You understand me? And like I said, I have Amerindian background in me. My mother's side is from that, right? The thing about it is that to me it will appears half naked, for the want of a better word, right? For the want of a better word, but to me, who is being cultured a different way, who are accustomed to dressing in a different way, right? If I
Mhm.
go into their communities and villages, to them I might seem, you know what I mean, some weird or something of the sort, right?
Right, right.
Because they're not accustomed to that. So it's
Mhm.
not being disrespectful in any way. We respect all different cultures and every man to his own order. He seem fit, but like Tyrone would have said earlier, and like I am saying is that based on my relationship with God and how I feel or what I feel God will be pleased with in terms of me dressing and whatever,
Mhm.
so be it. You know what I mean? I will let that relationship with God guide my conscience as it turns to dress, right? But it's not
Right.
to put down anybody else's culture, so to speak, right? But to just to use an example, all right? Like I use the
Mhm.
African people and so on,
Right,
right?
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. All right. Let's for a moment, we just happen to be all men in the room at the moment. All right? Let's take it down a little to the everyday. And I will come to you first, Tyrone. A woman dressing provocatively, maybe, she has on a top where some cleavage is shown, or pants that may be a little high, so a lot of our thighs are showing. Um, in your mind, what is wrong with a woman dressing in a sexy manner, in a provocative manner? What would you say is wrong with that?
I am glad you said in my mind because in my mind there are a lot of things. Honestly, there's one thing I've come to realize, that one thing that God did not give mankind the sole authority on, and that is to basically determines one's inner mind and their motive. I have no idea why the woman is dressed that way. Could it be that's the only thing she has? Could it be that she is a Christian, yes, but she's a new babe in Christ, and she came from a background life where she dressed like that, and so her wardrobe has not been changed as yet, and so she wears it. The truth is that when I see people like those walking around, there's one thing that comes to mind, and the only thing that comes to mind most of the time is basically, Lord, help them. Lord, take care of them. And that's what basically comes to mind. Because, and then I would not judge a person, as I said before, but to me, it sends a message of somebody who basically, not maybe looking for attention, so to speak, but somebody who needs,
Mm-hmm.
somebody who needs the love of God to cover them. And I'm choosing my words carefully. Somebody who needs the love of God to cover them. I think your mic is muted.
Your mic is muted,
Oh,
Nasty.
sorry. Where do you feel the sin lies? If someone steals, or if covetous, greedy, etc., we can readily identify, okay, what the sin is. But in terms of you know the provocatively dressed woman, Tyrone, where would you say the sin lies?
Now you're asking me to define what sin is, and I'm not. I'm going a little deeper than what I was taught sin to be as a transgression of God's law. All right.
Mhm.
But to me, sin is basically going against or doing anything that's in opposition to God. And one of the responses that Marcel read, sin is a state. We don't do wrong things because we to become sinner. We do wrong things because we are sinners. Not to become, but because we are. And so again, I would not stay on the outside. And it depends on the dress too. I don't stay on the outside and say that, well, she has sinned and what sin she did commit. But what I would say is this, from this perspective, when Adam and Eve sinned and they found they were naked, what did God do? They sewed fig leaves. The fig leaves would not have, literally, putting fig leaves together would not basically cover you totally, so to speak. And so God made clothing of a lamb skin or goat skin. That's a proper covering. So literally, God covered their nakedness, literally, and
Mhm.
symbolically also.
Yep.
Which says to me, that's why I said what needs to be exposed. Exposure of nakedness is in opposition to who God is.
Okay. The subject of nakedness, Randy.
Yep.
How and why do you think society got to a point where there is so much conflict with the concept of nakedness? There is so much turmoil when this is the way in which we enter into the world, right? Where was the disconnect? What happened in your mind there, Randy? Why are we so uncomfortable with the concept of nakedness?
Sin. Basically, one word, sin. I mean, sin would have thwarted everything that God would have made. When God, going back to the Garden of Eden, as Tyron said, when God made everything, including man and woman, they were naked, but they were not ashamed. And when sin came, it was a whole different onlook, all right, so to speak. Everything was thwarted from the way we see ourselves, from our diet, and every single thing was thwarted. So sin would have led to all the chaos that is happening right now in the world. All right, and the devil is using this um to his full advantage, you know what I mean, to cause confusion and put doubts in the mind of people and so on. So I agree that getting close to God and allow the Spirit of God to lead you, I guess it's what we can really depend on right now. Right? Only God can lead us into all truth. The Bible says He's going to lead us, His Spirit is going to lead us into all truth. All right. So we really need to get close to God and allow the Spirit of God to direct and to lead us. I just want to address, because I'm seeing in the chat and so on, people are saying different things and so on, and maybe they're misinterpreting. I don't want them to run away with the notion. I also support Tyron's point of view, not to be judgmental. I don't judge people. I have grown to realize that people do different things for different reasons. All right, and seeing a woman half naked or in revealing clothes, so to speak, I would not cast judgment on her. I don't know the circumstances. I don't know the reason why she's dressed that way. All right.
Mhm.
Now, if I know somebody that dresses one way and then dresses another way at a different time and all of these things, well, then I can draw my own conclusion then, right? But still
Mhm.
yet I would not be judgmental, so to speak, right? Because like I said, the different situation, right? I mean, I would not put that person down or whatever. I agree. We have people come to church. Sometimes we bring people out of the dance hall and the road and the carnivals and these things. Years of habits that they would have inculcated and all of these things, and we want them to change overnight. Sometimes they don't have a single decent piece of clothes, as we would say. You know what I mean? That's what they have, but they come in because the motive is pure. They have been convicted and by the Spirit of God, and they come in because they want to find and to know God. I mean, the clothing should not derail us and cause us to derail them from the true motive. All right. But in retrospect, that there's some people that will, you know what I mean, you know that they have and they will do certain things. Well, that's a different story altogether.
Right.
But even in that situation, I tried not to be judgmental. All right. To the persons in the chat who are talking about Africa and some of these things, I'm not putting anybody's culture down. Don't get me wrong. All right. Where I am from, in my little corner in Guyana, we are accustomed to certain things. I mean, like on the low coastal plain in Georgetown and more Haslington area. You know what I mean? And to see certain things that happens in the interior with the different tribes and so on, it's kind of different and weird to us, even though we know it's part of the culture. We're a society with 6 different races and everybody has their own culture and so on. We embrace it, but I'm just trying to say that how it may appear to us, you know what I mean, in certain ways, how it may appear to us in different jurisdictions. So again, I am putting anybody down. Don't get me wrong. All right. I appreciate you who appreciates your culture. That's fine. But I can only be led by the Spirit of God. And like I said, what to me pleases God, that is what I will do. And all those are under the span of my control, so to speak, like my children. I will try to teach them the way that God would impress on my heart, or the things that I believe that will please God.
If I may jump in here, thing, just me. So a thought just came to mind. I've never done a research on it, and I think it would be an interesting research of all those cultures where the dress is totally different to what we know. I don't want to use the half naked, where exposure is more than what is hidden. It would be interesting to find out about those cultures, how they live in terms of morality, in terms of lust and lust and having evil thoughts, in terms of the sexuality and adultery and fornication and so on. It would be interesting to do research to find out the level of that kind of behavior in those society. I'm not saying in our society the level is not high, but a comparative study on the level of such behavior will be important, because again, based on biblical evidence, when God brought Israel out of Egypt, the level of promiscuity and adulterous behavior in Egypt was great abomination to God. And it had a lot to do with how they dress and the different rituals and religious rites and so on. And so God brought Israel out of that. So I'm just saying it would be a very interesting study, a comparative study, not to look at the cultural dress in itself, but to look at the behavior and in relation to what offends God, what is offensive to God, and how they behave and so on. So that's the point I want to make.
So Cole, in my readings with regard to this subject, time and time again, I would come on the issue where, the problem seems to be that when a woman dresses provocatively, she tempts people. All right, she leads people to sin. And Samantha's Douglas is making the point here. Let's pause a minute and address what is
Mhm.
modest for men.
I was just
Because the
about to say that.
scantily dressed woman usually is the poster child for this discussion.
Mhm.
What about the scantily dressed man, Randy?
You see, and that's the thing, and I agree, and I like Samantha's question, and I agree with that. And lots of women will go down that road because society usually condemns the woman most. You know what I mean? Forgetting the man. I mean, this was way back in Jesus' time. Look when the woman was caught in adultery. She didn't commit adultery by herself, you know, but they didn't. Nobody made mention of the man. As a matter of fact, the man helped bring she there. You know what I mean? And and accusing her of adultery, trying to set Jesus up, so to speak, right? So and it's interesting, but however, as it as it relates to men, and modesty, um, for me there are certain levels, right? Um, like for example, I know I have a good friend who's a Seventh-day Adventist who did bodybuilding, and he did this competition. I'm into bodybuilding too, but I'm not into the competition part of it. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna take off my clothes and flex in front of people and stuff. But he did it, and he was condemned for it, basically, right? Because of that, because he had on, the bikini brief, and everything else was exposed, and he was flexing and so on. I for me, I would not do it. I mean, like I said, I have not condemned him, so to speak, because he is involved in a sport where, I mean, the muscle's supposed to be, you know what I mean? You're trying to reveal as much muscles as you can in various places, as and so on. Like and I guess in terms of staying modest and staying decent, also has to take into consideration events and places we will go that will determine or require us to dress in a certain way. So it is something that your relationship with God will also have to lead you. You understand me, to say whether or not you're going to be involved in a bodybuilding contest where I have to strip down in or whether I'm going to do swimming for the Olympics where I have to just swim in my. I mean, it's all up to you. It's all up to, because I can't condemn those persons because the event requires that. The event requires that. For me, if I'm not comfortable doing that, then I wouldn't do it. All right. So I think in those respects, and some men will just walk down the road without short, knowing that you have clothes and all of these things, exposing. I think some of those things are not appropriate in my opinion. You know what I'm saying? I have always been taught from a young age to dress properly. My grandmother insists that I put on a top. You know what I mean? Because even back then, even though we were not that much rich, and clothing and all these things were not prevalent, the little that we had my grandmother insisted that I covered as much as possible. So when I tried to put on a short pants, well, those things were acceptable for little boys. My pants and so on. I will sometimes put on a vest. She want me to put on a t-shirt to cover up more of me and all of these things. I don't know why, but that's how I was indoctrinated. I grew up like that, and so that's my teaching. That's how I see it. That's how I view it. And like I said, the Spirit of God really needs to lead, and I believe my own conviction and what pleases God will determine what is basically
All right.
acceptable.
Let's look
I would,
practically before you go on. Let's look practically at this whole issue of temptation, and like Tyrone was saying earlier, doing he wants to have a study because he kind of suspects that maybe there's a little connection between you know the immodest way in which people attire themselves and sin in the society and the destruction of the society. Tyrone, I would ask you, when David went after his general's wife, did the Bible hint at her being a provocatively clad woman?
To answer your question straight, the Bible says, I think the Bible says she was washing herself,
He was bathing, yeah.
which means she was bathing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
No motive behind that. She was just bathing.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings me to the point I want to make. I want to make a point on seduction. Because both genders, both male and female,
Do seductive
dress
things.
to seduce.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where the issue is.
Yeah.
Dressing to seduce for your own agenda, to carry your own agenda. You dress to seduce so that you can have somebody to take into your bed without getting married to them. Which says to me, one, sin is when we ourselves are drawn away by our own lust. I can't go to God and say to God, Sister X dressed this way, that's why I did that.
Mm.
And so it's a thing of the mind. We first see people and then we formulate thoughts in our minds to get them and how to get them. And then now we start dressing to get them. And I believe that is where the issue is in terms of dressing both male and female. So the guy that goes to gym, who walks around, he wants to get to this girl, who walks around with all his chest puffed up and all the rest of it. What's his motive? Secondly, the guy who sees the girl dressed in a very skimpy manner and who wants to go after her for sexual gratification without commitment, that person has a problem with their mind. So it's a case where, in my opinion, it's on both sides. The one who dresses to seduce, and the one whose mind is focused on sexual selfish gratification without a commitment of marriage. And I believe that is really the issue, because the Word of God says that we are drawn away, or we sin because we are drawn away by our own lust.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem now becomes the person who dresses to seduce and the person who lusts for sexual gratification and satisfaction. And one last point on we make a bit on nakedness, because the thing is, Adam and Eve became ashamed because they saw they were naked. When society begins to be naked and don't feel shame about it, that's serious. Sin brings shame. Nakedness brings shame, but brought shame upon Adam and Eve because they disobeyed God. And when we go contrary to God and who God is, and we feel no shame about it, then it's a dangerous spiritual situation that we find ourselves in. And so the problem is the mind. The mind is the problem. The mind is the problem. Many of us, sometimes we dress, we go to work because we want a workmate to see us, and we want to attract a workmate, so we can dress modestly. We can be fully covered, but our motive is so evil and so wicked that we dress the way the person expects us to dress, wants us to dress, but in our minds, we want to get to this person for our sexual gratification. So if the person likes you to be fully covered, you dress fully covered because you want to have your sexual desires satisfied without commitment of marriage.
All
But
right. Tyrone, you made a point
but
about the mind. Hold on, Randy. You
just
made
to
a
add,
point about the mind. The mind. All right.
Mm.
Let's look at that thing about it. Now, what we want to address, whose mind? Is it the provocatively dressed person, or is it the person lusting after that? No. Before we get there, I don't know if either of you would have had conversations with women, but enough conversations with women, you would or may have encountered a woman who would have told you a story about she being properly clothed, fully clothed, top to bottom, and a man looking at her and undressing her with his eyes. She's fully clothed, right? But he, in the way he looks at her, undresses her with his eyes, and she feels dirty after. All right, nothing to do with how she appears. All right. So whose mind has the darkness, Randy?
Um, before I answer that, I was going to ask the question. To Tyrone, shouldn't we be our brother's keeper? In terms of, I mean, like Tyrone would have rightly said, some people dress in a certain way to fulfill their own personal desires, right? And in the same way, shouldn't we? I saw someone put in that no matter what they put on because of the shape and all of these things, they can't help it. They can't help revealing or in, I mean, for the want of a better word, help showing out some of the curves of all of these things. I'm not sure how true that is. But the point is that as much as possible, if we can um, help a brother or a sister from being corrupt in the mind with the things that we wear and the parts that we show out, in my mind, I think we should try our best to do that, right? Um, we really can't help a person who um who has a mind issue, who has an issue in his mind when he looks at a woman who is fully covered and undressed for. I think that starts with some sort of desire for the woman, first of all. So it doesn't matter what she wears, he will address her because he sees her in a certain way. He wants to fulfill his personal desire, which in that he perhaps always had a liking for this woman, or she. I mean, she draws his attention in somewhere or the other, right? I mean, that person has a mind issue that he needs to deal with, right? Um, because another guy would look at the same woman and she wouldn't even move him, right? So that person has an issue in the mind, right? Somebody who dresses for attention or who dresses to seduce somebody, they have a problem also, all right? Self-esteem and all of these things comes into play, because if you think you can only win a man by the way you look, then you really have a problem. You know what I mean? Because now these days, it's far more than the way you look, right? It's about the inner person. You know, there are some persons that are not so favorably looking, but they have excellent personalities, and the inner man is so beautiful that it makes them look beautiful in your eyes. You know what I mean? So if you're gonna tell yourself that you need to show little boobs and pull in this thing a little tight so that the bum can show and roll and all of these things to attract a man, then you too have a problem. You too have an issue. You know, so it goes both ways. The person who does this thing for attention and to fulfill his or her own desire, they have a problem. And then the individual who looks on and conceive things in their minds also, they have an issue. So
Um,
I'm not here to cast blame.
But Tyrone, who has really caused the problem? Who has really caused most of the problem? The
I'm gonna.
provocatively dressed person, or the perpetrators of these acts of lust?
Can I make a short comment on Randy's upon Randy's
Yeah, go
comment,
ahead.
and then the thing is, Randy, if as men we're being honest with ourselves, we would recognize that society in general, from the songs that we hear, from the message that are being put forward, they put women in a certain bracket that women are
True.
only good for
True,
sexual gratification. So when whoever it is, it doesn't matter how the woman dresses, whenever a man sees her, the first thing that comes to his mind, how can I get her into bed?
Yeah, we're visual.
And
We're visual.
and
to,
and,
yeah,
and
true.
no, that's not visual or not, Randy, it is there. And unless we have the power of Christ operating in us as men, it doesn't matter what a woman puts on, it will always be our mindset that will see her in a certain way and want to do certain things to her. That's the reality.
True,
Now,
I agree.
now to the question that Brother Anansi asked, I'm going to use David as an excuse. David's prayer was this. You know, David's prayer was never Bathsheba's dress. Let's check it out. David's prayer in Psalm 51 was never spoke about Bathsheba's dress. David's prayer was totally
About himself. Yeah, true,
I
true.
am one Lord. I was born in sin, shame, and iniquity. I sinned against thee. I did this. So as men, let us take responsibility and stop blaming women for the way they dress for our actions. Because at the end of the day, it is what's in your mind that will kill for. Let me ask a question, a simple question. You don't have to respond. For many of us here, if we see, I'm going to use the social term that they use, the social sexual workers dressed a certain way, we are not interested. So the way they dress doesn't affect us. Why? Because it is not in our mind to go after them. So it boils down to my point in saying it is what's in the man's mind that causes him to go after, to satisfy. And that is when he will have a problem with the dress. I can remember an experience I had with myself and another guy. You know him too, Randy. You know him very well from your church. We decided to do a ministry on by the courts in Brigham. You know what happens there? By Parliament Building area. That's where they come out at nights. So we decided we decided to go to meet them where they are. And as we went there, you saw the dressing, but our mission was to meet them, so the dressing did not affect us. So in response to the question, the person who dresses that way, yes, they need to address their mindset. But more specifically, more importantly for each individual, as men, we need to address our mindset. And in essence, what I'm saying here, the responsibility is on each person to know what they're doing, if it's opposing or if it's offensive to God. We have that individual responsibility.
All right. Sandra Barker is making the point that dress has nothing to do with violating women. We need to stop blaming women for this. That is the sin, overpowering the person, then giving into temptation and using their power to commit these acts. The majority of men control themselves. All right.
Correct.
Now you were admitting there just now, Tyrone, that a lot of the problem is with men and the way they think. The reality is in cultures where women are dressed from head to toe, there is no less incidences of abuse and rape.
That's the point I'm making.
That is a hard fact.
Yeah.
All right. Now, the other thing I want to address, and it goes to your point, Tyrone, about the minds of men. Between you and Randy, you may have again here sat with an adult woman, an adult friend, maybe a sister of the church, maybe a work colleague, and she would have told you a story of maybe somebody or some grandfather, some old guy somewhere who used to come at their parents' home, all right, and would call them as a little 6 or 7-year-old girl child in the presence of their parents, and these men will find their hands between the thighs of these little girls. Nothing to do with apparel. All right, absolutely nothing to do with apparel. So it asks the question again: where does dress really come in when we talk about temptation and the minds of men, Tyrone?
All right, let me just jump in quickly
Okay, go
before
ahead,
time.
Randy. Go ahead, Randy. Go ahead.
The thing about it is that I agree with what you're saying. The mind. All right, because that's where the whole this whole battle is for the mind of a man, right? But you must agree with me, Tyrone. A woman will pass by fully clothed, and she may not turn my head, but then one will turn in skimpy clothes, and my head will quickly turn. You understand? So we cannot eliminate the fact that one who is revealing much doesn't add to or doesn't lend support to invoke those sort of thoughts a man may have in his mind. Like you would have established, we all have it in our mind. A man, society, the music, and everything would have painted women in such a way, and so we have been indoctrinated in a certain way. We have it in our mind. We see women in a certain way. But then there are issues where a woman would not move me, even though I have certain things in my mind, when she dresses a certain way. And then this same woman might dress in another way, and then she can catch my attention. We cannot eliminate the fact that dress and the way we dress and how we reveal certain things wouldn't invoke certain feelings also. All right, because as much as we live and we try to live to the standard of God, basically we're trying to suppress and to eliminate those evil thoughts. You know what I'm saying? And it's not a one-time thing, all-time thing. It's something that we constantly have to be battling with and fighting with and wrestling with. You understand me? The inner man that is prone to sin, right? And we really need to depend upon God to taper that part within us and to allow His Spirit to take control. You know what I'm saying? But there are things that will cause distractions. There are things that will catch us off guard and will cause us or invoke feelings of that will cause us to look at a woman in a certain way. And I'm saying the way a woman carries herself lends support to that, not eliminating the points that you would have made early in terms of a man's mind and its sinful thoughts and nature and all of these things.
All right. Rennie and Dewsbury saying, I've actually heard men say, a fully clothed and covered woman in a well-fitting dress, not tight, but classy, is more appealing than a scantily dressed woman. All right. So,
and that's so true.
You were both, making the point is, Tyrone said earlier, we could look at a certain class of women doing a certain kind of job, and they would be scantily dressed and we not necessarily be moved.
And that's a state of mind. And
Randy, I will ask you a question you know, I will ask you a barbershop question, man to man. Do you and you know, looking around the world, looking at women. As a man, do you find that you admire the modestly dressed woman, or do you instinctively admire the provocatively dressed woman? Barbershop question.
Barbershop answer.
Mm.
I'll give you a barbershop answer. And I'm being honest. Y'all don't kill me. I mean, I've grown over the years, and to me, like what that young lady would have said, that there's some women that dress modestly, that really appeals to men. And that's me. That's me. Well covered and so on, right? To me now, when a woman dress in a certain way, to me it's a turn off. That's just me. But the truth of the matter is, at one point, barbershop answer, I was like, and I used to tell my friends this, I will enjoy looking at other women wearing revealing clothes, but my girlfriend can't wear revealing clothes. And that was my state of mind. You know what I mean? I wouldn't
Randy,
mind.
but you know, that's a contradiction in a lot of Christian brothers, right?
Yes,
Where they will say they admire whoever, you know, next door in a hot pants, but then
because
they
I'm
said, but the wife can't wear the. Why is that, Randy?
yeah, because I'm possessive. I'm possessive. You understand what I'm saying? I don't want other men to see what I'm supposed to be seeing and having. You know what I mean? But then again, seeing seeing somebody else walking down and the women exposing, you know what I mean? I look at, but that was me at one point. But and that's the barbershop answer. That's how it is. You know, sometimes we'll be at the barbershop presently, and you might, and somebody passes on the road. The person who looks good in revealing will quickly catches your eyes, and them guys will say, "Is who the?" And everybody looking and looking. You know what I'm saying? But in terms of where I am now, modesty, well kept women, well covered women, women who are neatly attired and taken care of, and someone who has a nice personality. Those are persons who are attracted to me, who are attractive to me. That's and that's a state I am in right now. I'm not easily swayed by anything. Some guys will tell me, and I will tell guys now, because I like that day I went to the shop and this young girl come and this guy was hustling her and he was like, "What there, blah blah blah," you know. And when the girl left and them started stuff, I said, "Man, those things are for you." Right? I said, I am a teacher, but right now, and I teach ages like that. So I can't allow myself to think in that way, because that wouldn't lend support for me being a professional. I said, I teach 4th and 5th farmers and 6th farmers. Those are who I teach, and I see them every day, and I can't look at them like that. You understand me? My Christian part wouldn't allow me to look at it, and even the carnal man, that part for me has died for me. I'm telling you, I don't see them in any way in that sort. And I was, you know, and when he was fascinated and going on, and said, she's a little child. I have daughters. That's how I see them now. I see them as like my daughters. That's how I see my students. You know what I mean? As my own, as my children, my own very own daughters. So I can't look at them in the way. You know, it's a state of mind. You know what I mean? How you see things, how you conceive things, how you know what I mean, internalize things and so on.
Now, Tyrone, don't you think, as we look at it, that we can come to a place where we as men, we can actually see somebody, say, hey, you know, that person looks good, or whatever, that person looks good, and not be in our minds lustful or sinful or necessarily wanting to crave them? Don't you think that maybe we and our minds need to be rebooted, so to speak?
Definitely.
It needs some serious rebooting.
Definitely.
And just to bring a balance to what we're talking about, there are some females who are after males also, who would go all out and just basically be some the way some men dress, all right, and whatever is seen by the woman. I know I grew up in an age where they told us that it's only men that's visual. But when you look at today's society, I think that negates the idea that only men are visual. Most of women are also visual.
Hmm.
And so what the men wear also can also be immodest. The other thing is, when it comes to rebooting the mind, it is only Christ who can do that.
Trust me.
It is only God who can do that. By nature, is it? Randy used the word invoke, and I want to say to him tonight and to our listeners, a woman cannot bring out of you what has already been placed inside of you. I'll put it this way: a woman cannot put things in your mind
Mm.
that was already there.
That's true, Tyrone.
Sin,
But
sin, sin. Just a minute. Just a minute. Sin is a state, and I'm going back to my point.
Mm.
Both individuals, they need a rebooting of the mind. Having said that, again, I cannot sit here and say that a woman who is curvy, who has a good shape and so on, and no matter what she puts on, the shape somehow will be accentuated, whatever it is. I cannot say that her motive is to seduce the onlookers. When we dress to leave our homes, we tell ourselves we want to look good going on the road. We want to present properly going on the road. As a Christian, we should not be dressing going on the road looking any old how. As somebody said, we should dress like children of the king. And in dressing like children of the king, we cannot control the onlooker's mind. So when the woman dresses and feels good about her dress and feels comfortable, and then there come these men on the road with all these dirty remarks that make her feel less of herself. Those men need help. They need help. And sometimes I feel sorry for these women, because I believe that if some of them don't have a real strong character and personality, many of them might end up committing suicide, or many of them might end up doing stuff. Because I just give an example, Amber. Just allow me to give you an example.
Mhm.
And there I stood by a bank. The line was long, and a beautiful, a handsome young gentleman was standing in front of me. And there a young lady passed. She was dressed a certain way. I don't see her as being immodestly dressed, even though her skirt was a bit short. And a guy made a comment, and his comment was highly sexual, dehumanizing, and demeaning. And there was this gentleman, well-dressed gentleman, standing in front of me, smiling and laughing. And the other a young lady was standing in front of him. And I said, why are you smiling about that? I said, those things that he said to the young lady, they're basically demeaning.
Mhm.
He should not do that. The gentleman said to me, we live in a world of free speech. So the man has a right to say what he said. I said, that's nonsense. And the young lady that stood in front of him was just shaking her head in disgust. So even to the well-dressed men have problem with the mind, with the mindset.
Right.
And yes, well, and yes, and Nancy, we need to be able to look at women who dress beautifully, say to them, you look magnificent, you look fantastic.
Without any,
Even to those women who dress in short clothing and what we may term skimpy dressing, we can still look at them and tell them you look beautiful without having any motive of trying to get them to go to bed. It's something I normally do to women that I see on the road. I said, wow, you have a beautiful smile. There are a number of things that you can comment on a woman to make her feel good of herself, rather than just looking at her body or dress or everything else. And for me, simplicity is it for me.
Right.
So we can do it.
just
Yeah,
yeah,
go ahead, Randy.
because I like you. I usually give compliments where it is needed. Sometimes I'll see a pretty young lady and I'll just say you extremely pretty, and I keep going my way. She'll smile and go along way, not no, you know what I'm saying? To me, yeah, I've said you're extremely pretty, you're beautiful, and I just keep going. Just in passing, I'll see that, and I will never see the young lady again, or so. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, yeah, we can compliment people and so on, but but I mean, like, it's hard for me to, because like I said, I am also steered by my values. I'm also steered by my standards and my principles. You know what I mean? So sometimes that wouldn't allow me to give a compliment to a woman who in my mind I think should be more correct or less revealing. So you understand me?
Right.
To look beautiful when it's to me you're very revealing and seductive and all of these things.
Randy,
Right?
question, Randy. Can a woman be a woman who adorns herself in jewelry, who's very provocative in her clothing, and also adorn herself well spiritually, have a good heart, a kind mind? Can there be such a woman, or you don't think those things can all go together? Where, you know, she can be that kind of woman who likes to dress in a sexy manner, but have a good heart and have a good mind and be kind.
Certainly, some of the nicest person are out to the church, you know. You understand? Some of the you meet some nice, very nice persons who are out of the church. You know,
I'm glad you said that.
I mean, I have an aunt who doesn't believe in God. She's from Cuba, but she's the nicest person ever.
Sure, doesn't make people nice.
Nicest person ever. When your personality and everything and so, she's the nicest person ever. I can tell you, I so love this woman.
Going to church doesn't make people nice, Randy.
No, I'm saying that I'm just trying to make the point, because I'm trying to answer his question that some of the nicest person are out of church. So like you rightly saying, going to church doesn't make you nice, or being in church, or to answer Nancy's question, yes, there are some women who dress and looks good in church, and on other occasions they will indulge in certain things. That doesn't make them a naughty person. You understand what I'm saying? It's their preference, and like I said, I wouldn't judge the person. Your state of mind has to be different in how you see things. And like I said, I am also guided by my standards. So I won't put you down or judge you or anything. But I can't give you a compliment that is against my principles and standards and liking, so to speak. You may look good to Tyrone, but not to me. And that's all right. because Tyrone has a different liking from me. You understand me? So what might look good to Tyrone might not look good for me. And what might look good for me might not be for Tyrone, or Tyrone might like both ways. You understand me? However it comes, that's just his, because that's just his view or perspective. To him, the personality might be more appealing than anything else. You understand me? But to me, I look at it holistically, right? Because I've seen beautiful women, facially, outwardly beautiful, but the inside makes them look ugly to me when you get to know them and so on. And I've also seen persons who are not so beautiful according to societal standards, but when you know them, they're the most beautiful person. You know what I mean? In your eyes. I have many friends like that people would not consider nice because they have a little size and all of these things. But when you get to know them, their personality, they have some electrifying smile and just nice to be around them, just nice to be in their company, just nice to talk to them and all of these things and so on. So
All right. Thank you there. Thank you. All right. Thank you all who've been commenting. Thank you, anyone new who have joined us. Welcome aboard. It's been real good having you. We'll be closing with the question: does God care what we wear? I want us to, pause and really think about that for a moment. Does God care what we wear? And before I bring on back Marcel, I'll tell you a little, story. It's actually two different incidents, but it relates to the same thing. And this is not about revealing clothing in this instance. Marcel and I, had two experiences. In one Sabbath morning, we were heading, downtown, heading out to Barbados, downtown, maybe to go to the market or something. And we saw what we knew to be a couple of Adventist, Christians heading out to church. And we said a very pleasant, happy Sabbath. But of course, we were just in the market. And they turned and they looked at us with scorn. I mean, literal scorn, right? And did not even respond. All right. Wow. Years later, we were passing another church, another Adventist church, and I mean, Marcel was, dressed for church. I was in a short file because I was just following her, right? And the guy came out there, and he wanted to invite both of us. I mean, I'm looking at him and I'm saying, hey, look at how I'm dressed, I'm not dressed. He said, no, come, right? And I pointed that to say that, I think there are some of us who go beyond the apparel, right? And understand that there's something deeper there. So the question is, what we want to close off with, does God care what we wear? And we'll be back shortly.
Okay, welcome back. I'm back again. It's so good to be here. I'm telling you, I miss you guys. I miss you guys. I miss you guys so badly. But does God care what we wear? Tyrone, what's your thoughts?
Yes, he does. If God didn't care, he would not have changed Adam and Eve's leaves to give them a literal covering from a goat's skin. That's one. Secondly, if God didn't care, he would not have given mankind the skills, the intelligence, and the wisdom to make clothing to cover us. Because if we were to walk in this sun without clothing, that's a different story altogether.
Hmm.
Skin cancer, all the rest of it. So God cares. Secondly, God cares about how we represent him
Okay.
because we were made in his image. We were made for his glory, meaning we were made to reflect who God is. We were made to choose him and for him to lead us to live a life that's of a highest quality. And so if God didn't care, he would not have given us the whole concept or the idea of what it means to be covered. Covered by him, righteousness, covered by him in his love. And so God cares what we wear because what we wear reflect on who God is to us. Note my words, who God is to us. And because he loves us so much, he gave us his way of life. He gave us his way of dress. And he basically, through his love for us, will direct us and give us guidance in the way we dress. He created us with that figure. He created a woman with a figure, the physical body. He fashioned women. He formed man from the dust of the ground. And therefore, because he's the creator, he's the only one who would know what's best to cover us and how much we should cover, how we dress, and how we represent him on earth. And finally, as we dress, let us dress our internal first. When we dress the inside, the outside will be taken care of. God bless you all tonight.
Thank you, Tyrone. Randy, your
Mm-hmm.
take. A lot of the people in the chat there they're referring to the text that says rend your heart and not your garment. You know, we grew up hearing this. You know, God
That's not a
wants
text in
us
the Bible,
to rend. This is rend your heart.
It's not in the Bible.
Right.
It says rent,
Yeah.
tear your heart, not
Tear
rent.
your heart. Yes. All right. Your heart and not your garment. To tear your heart and not your garment. Because of course, there's a whole backstory to that, right? But what they're saying in essence is that the importance should be on, on your life and your relationship with God, and not what you put on. What's your take, Randy?
I endorse what Tyrone would have said. Um, just a backpedal before I get to your question. If the first thing man ever made was what he sewed together, what he sewed up to cover himself, and even that wasn't good enough for God. So literally God covered him the way he wanted to cover them, and spiritually, with his robe of righteousness, because ours are like filthy rags. Um, God cares what we indeed wear. Bible says, whatever we eat, whatever we drink, whatever we do all to the glory and the honor of God. So indeed, God cares. You know, I also endorse the fact that um, what's on the inside will be revealed on the outside.
Okay.
You know, it comes out, right? A person is nice on the inside, they will appear nice on the outside. And I've seen this, persons who are miserable on the inside they will look miserable on the outside. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
so I really am endorse the fact indeed that we need to guard our hearts. We need to look at the inner person, right? Because that's what God really concerns about. And the inner person or the inner person will affect the outer person some way or
Right.
the other, right? In like manner, if you're a nice person inside, it will reveal on the outside, and vice versa. So yeah, people have the notion that they say render your heart. That's the old saying. Misconstrue the entire thing. But if even if you're gonna put it that way and say that you're gonna give up your heart and not your garment, then your heart your heart, the inner person will reveal or will shine out on the outside. You know what I mean? So that's my take on the whole thing. In terms of being modest, in terms of dressing, in terms of God caring, yes, He does. I endorse what Tyrone have said, and our body, we need to take care of it. But we need to pay special attention to the inner man, the inner person, our thoughts, our state of mind. All right, and it's only God can really um, curb us and shape us to what He wants us to be. We need to allow Him to work in us.
Okay. We've had a really, really good night. I am happy to be here tonight. I've been working so hard. Like you guys know, you've not seen me for weeks. I was in the chat, but I'm happy. Yes, Tyrone, you wanted to add
I want to
something else?
address something that quickly that one of the contributors mentioned on the online about the chat about the tribes and so on.
Yes.
Yeah, God cares about them. God sees them how they dress. God knows
Mhm.
how you will deal with them.
Exactly.
God knows what you will do with them. God knows how you will bring them to the place where He wants them to be. And
Oh
let's be
yes.
honest, God takes people from where they are to bring them to where He wants them to be.
Hmm.
And not everybody is on the same page when it comes to relationship with God. And that is
Exactly.
why we can't judge anybody. So
God knows the
while
heart and the
while
motive.
no while they are there in their culture, God is
Hmm.
still working with them. God is still
Oh,
working on them. And
oh
when
yes.
God is finished with them, He's going to bring them to the place where He wants them to be, where He intended for them to be, in dress, in culture, in everything that He wants them to be. He will bring them to that place. I can't judge them on how they dress. God is going to deal with them His way and how He intended for them to be.
Well, that's a whole different subject on the meaning of in terms of the whole thing about rending and what's important in terms of culture, which culture is right or what is right or what is wrong in terms of God's eyes when He created us all,
Mm.
in terms of our dress and if we talk about the Armenians earlier and their culture and their way of dress, right? But we have adopted, we were given a culture that I don't even know if it is ours,
You just had another
right?
topic there, Marcel.
Exactly,
Glad you read
exactly.
them. Look up.
And that has been one of the things I was thinking about all because I'm thinking about this whole
Is God indecent?
topic.
What's that?
Is God indecent? Is God immodest?
Nope.
But he created us, so he can't be anything that is unlike perfection because we've all been taught that he's perfect in all his
So
ways.
in God's eyes, there is modesty and indecency. That's the point I'm trying to
But
make.
oh my goodness, that's a whole different thing. But
That's what I'm
Tyrone,
trying to
I'm gonna ask you one question though. When we talk about God clothing us, I know we're going over now.
Mhm.
When we talk about God clothing, that's a question I had in mind when I was sitting. And women were given, two sets of things. We cover the top and then we cover the bottom, right? Was it God who decided that he was going to cover the female in that way and the men only below? Right? Was that a decision that God made in seeing our nakedness?
When God covers one nakedness, he covers everything. Because the thing is that the truth matter is all of us are naked before God. All of us.
Right. But I
All
was
are naked in
talking
the eyes of God.
whenever,
But in terms of presentation to the public because God said to the Israelites, the priests were to wear long robes. Because how they built the sanctuary, when they served, they had to go up a step. All right. And God said to Israelites, plain in the Bible, he said, you're going to wear the robe down to your ankle so that when you climb the stairway, your nakedness will not be shown. So God has something about nakedness that he doesn't want to be seen.
Agreed, Tyrone, agreed.
Okay.
That's what he said to them. When you climb it, because when you climb a stairway and somebody at the bottom, you know what happens. As you get closer to the top of the stairway, you know what happens. And so God is saying to the Israelites, look, when the priest is going to climb this stairway to do this service, your nakedness should not be shown.
And that was a literal nakedness. That's a whole different. And so that was he was talking
whether
about
it was
literal
nakedness, whether it was literal nakedness, it was exposure.
Okay.
Exposure of what God did not want others to see.
Exactly.
In that particular setting.
Okay. I have a thing from a pastor of ours. Glorifying God is the ultimate purpose of gender attraction, which is built in by the Creator into every human being, male or female. If we take that fact out of sexuality, from the sexuality equation, we fall in trouble. We need to be matured enough to appreciate God's greatness in creating us with sexual attractiveness. All right. We are thankful that we were here another Monday night. There's so much to talk about. The last question we asked, whether God cares, I don't believe that. He don't want us to be, our Creator does not want us to be lewd, and we must know based on our relationship with our God and our Creator what we see as lewd or what we see as not appropriate for whatever setting. But in terms of how God sees us and what if God cares about, he cares about our heart. I don't believe, when it went all boils down, I don't believe that he cares about whether I put on a knee-length skirt or a long flare one or one trim asset, but that's just me.
Okay.
But I want to thank you all for joining us. It's always so beautiful to see you and to hear from you. Tyrone, thanks a million for always saying yes, and you've just been with us. Randy, man, you've just been there, taking all the punches sometimes, punching back and things. I love it. Right? We've had so many friends out tonight. I see some people that I want to, really thank you for commenting. I see Renita, and we have a new person that I'm not familiar with. Billy King. Billy, I'm not familiar with you, but I'm thankful that you chose the Georgetown Tea House to come and share. I hope I see you again. Simone, it's always good to see you, Simone Nelson, Sandra Barker. Sandra, I hope you had a good birthday. All right. So again, thank you so very much for chatting with us, for sharing your thoughts. And next Monday, next Monday. We're looking forward to seeing you with us. And don't forget to tell your friends and family that, the Georgetown Tea House is on, and, some things you're going to agree with, some things you're not going to agree with, but it's okay. We're here to just to discuss things, And at the end of the day, we want you to go read your Bible, to research, to do your own studies, and to ask God to lead you. All right. So that's the aim of the tea house. Each one teach one. We'll be teaching others as we go along. Tyrone, any last thing before we say good night?
God cares of everything that we do. Just like care what my child wears, and just so you care what your son wears, God cares about what we wear. God cares for us. God loves us. God loves us too much not to care for us.
All right. Okay. So God loves us, more than enough not to care for us. All right.
Whatever we do all to the glory of God.
Okay. Thank you so much, and good night, guys.
Good night.
Examine any profound event in the Bible or in the history of Christianity, and one is sure to recognize the consistently pivotal role of conversational interactions. We see this at play in Genesis, the first book, where through a series of conversations we witness the fall of our species and the expulsion from the Garden of Eden. The conversation between God and man, the conversation between man and woman, the conversation between the woman and the devil, and so on. At the Georgetown Tea House, we know the great importance and pivotal role that conversations often play in our lives on this earth. And thus, we will seek to engage in the types of conversations that are insightful, stimulating, and thought-provoking. And yes, occasionally, a trifle boring. Our hope is that with each visit to the tea house, we can become better aware of who we are, of our relationship with God, and where we stand with each other and the rest of humankind. And yes, through it all, there will be music. For music, it had been written, is the food of love, and God is love. Join us every Monday evening on Facebook and YouTube Live for conversations at the Georgetown Tea House, a gospel side of me